Hey y'all, it's Two Brains, Three Eyes, and I'm back with another video. Let's talk about something that's been misunderstood or clipped out of context and used to create narratives that don't always reflect reality. So, this is about Chris Tucker, Jeffrey Epstein, and the humanitarian trip that Tucker has spoken about publicly. But nuance matters, and so does truth. All right. So when people hear that Chris Tucker's name appeared on a flight log connected to Jeffrey Epstein, the internet apparently filled in the blanks, often without listening to what Tucker himself said. So Chris Tucker has directly addressed this. He didn't dodge it or anything like that. He didn't deny being on the trip, and he didn't even pretend that it didn't happen. So instead, he he explained why he went, what he believed at the time, and what the trip was presented as. So according to Tucker, the trip was framed as a humanitarian mission. So it wasn't a vacation, it wasn't a party trip, or it wasn't framed as anything inappropriate, right? So the purpose, as it was explained to him, was to visit Africa with a group of people involved in charitable and global outreach work, specifically connected to debt relief and humanitarian advocacy at the time. And Epstein was publicly associated with powerful institutions and philanthropy and high profile figures. So, his darker actions were not publicly known at that time, and that context matters. Chris Tucker was already deeply involved in humanitarian work long before that trip. He had worked closely with organizations focused on global poverty, debt relief, and humanitarian aid, particularly in Africa. So when the invitation came, it aligned with work that he was already doing. So there was no red flag at the time because the red flags had not been exposed yet. So Tucker has said plainly he believed that the trip was about helping people, and I do believe him. And he believed that it was about awareness and advocacy, and he believed he was participating in something positive. But that belief didn't come from ignorance or recklessness. It came from the information that was available at the time. Now, this is an important point that gets lost online. How can I put this? Hindsight is not foresight, right? So I'm going to say that again. Hindsight is not foresight, all right? So what we know now about Epstein did not exist in the public sphere back then. So there weren't any viral documentaries or unsealed court documents. So there weren't any mainstream reporting detail that scopes of his crimes or anything like that. So many people, politicians, or even scientists or celebrities, academics, interacted with Epstein under the assumption that he was simply a wealthy financer and philanthropic interest. So Chris Tucker was not unique in that, right? And when the truth came out, Tucker distanced himself completely. He stopped all contact. He made it clear he had no involvement beyond that trip, and he expressed disgust and condemned Epstein's crimes after they were exposed. So that's a key difference. And there's also no allegation that Chris Tucker participated in or witnessed anything inappropriate. And no victim has named Chris Tucker in particular. No evidence connects him to wrongdoing. No pattern of behavior supports the narrative people try to imply. What exists is guilt by association, amplified by internet culture that prefers scandal over nuance. And here's the uncomfortable truth. When scandals like this break, people often want every name to mean the same thing, but reality doesn't work that way. Being in proximity to a predator does not automatically make someone complicit, especially when the predator was actively masking their behavior and leveraging power, money, and philanthropy to do so. But Chris Tucker has built a reputation over decades as someone who is private. I would say that he's faith-driven or family-oriented, and he's deeply involved in charity. So nothing about his life before or after aligns with the narrative people try to force onto him. So that doesn't mean we excuse Epstein. It doesn't mean we victimize or minimize victims. And it doesn't mean we ignore accountability where it belongs. It means we apply discernment instead of assumptions, right? So when Chris Tucker says he believed it was a humanitarian trip, that statement isn't a defense strategy. It's an explanation rooted in timing, context, and reality. And whether people like it or not, the facts support that explanation, right? So this conversation isn't about protecting celebrities. It's about understanding how predators operate and how they embed themselves in respected spaces, how they use philanthropy as camouflage, and how many people don't realize what they're standing next to until the mask comes off. All right. So I would say if we want to prevent the next Epstein, we have to understand how he hid, not just who stood near him, because outrage without understanding doesn't protect anyone. All right. Now, to dive into something else, not every dangerous situation looks dangerous at first. And I'm sure all of us can relate to that, right? Sometimes it looks like opportunity, and sometimes it looks like networking. Sometimes it looks like a good cause, and sometimes it looks like a party. That's not funny, but I'm just thinking back on, anyways. One of the most misunderstood dynamics in elite circles is how billionaires and ultra wealthy individuals gain trust and influence, right? So they don't do it by force, but through beguilement. And beguilement is subtle. It's charm layered with access. It's generosity mixed with power. It's status wrapped in good intentions. And by the time people realize what they're standing next to, the damage is already done. So, here's something that we have to understand. So these are not normal parties. So they're not loud clubs. They're not wild ragers. They're not chaos. They're not, they're controlled environments. I'll put it like that. So you have private jets and you have private homes. You have private islands. They have invitation only dinners, philanthropic galas, think tanks, quote unquote, humanitarian trips, and everything sounds respectable, but that's not an accident. All right. So billionaires understand something very important about human psychology. So people lower their guard around power when power presents itself as benevolent. And if someone is rich and claims to help the world, people assume safety, right? So if someone is connected and respected, people assume legitimacy. So if everyone else in the room looks normal, people assume nothing bad could happen there. So this is how predators hide, literally in plain sight, right? They don't lead with darkness. They lead with charity, intelligence, connections, exclusivity, and most importantly, plausible deniability. Take Jeffrey Epstein as an example, not because he was unique, but because he was a blueprint. He didn't invite people to anything that looked illegal at the time. He invited them to economic discussions, global policy conversations, scientific roundtables. He invited them to fundraisers and, humanitarian travel. And that's how the trap works, right? So here's the key psychological move. And it's access creates obligation, right? So when someone flies you private, introduces you to powerful people, or opens doors you couldn't open alone, your brain automatically registers gratitude, even if you never asked for it. And gratitude softens boundaries in a way. Not because people are weak, but because they're human, right? And another tactic is social proof. So if respected people are already there, you assume it's safe. So you tell yourself, okay, well, if he's here, it must be legit. Or if she's here, it must be fine. If the media hasn't exposed anything, what could be wrong? And that's how the entire rooms gets compromised without anyone noticing in real time. And let's be clear, Most people who attend these gatherings are not doing anything wrong. They're not conspiring. They're not participating. They're not aware. They're being managed. So predators don't need everyone involved. They only need silence, distraction, and normalization. And another thing people miss, these environments are designed to fragment experiences. So what one person sees is not what another person sees, right? So someone attends a dinner and someone else attends a flight. Someone else may attend a meeting. So no one sees the full picture, and that's intentional. And when the truth comes out later, the internet asks, how did nobody know? The answer is simple. They didn't have the whole map. So predators operate in compartments, right? So there's also a class illusion at play. We're taught that wealth equals intelligence, that money equals morality, that philanthropy equals goodness. But money only equals leverage, and it doesn't equal character. And some people use that leverage to hide very dark behavior. And this is why just being at the party doesn't automatically mean complicity. Presence does not equal participation. Association does not equal endorsement. And proximity does not equal knowledge. So that doesn't mean victims shouldn't be believed. It doesn't mean crime should be minimized. It just means that we should be accurate about how manipulation actually works. Because if we don't understand the mechanism, we can't prevent the next one. Billionaires don't beguile people with fear. They beguile them with comfort, validation, and opportunity. They make people feel chosen in a way, and humans are wired to respond to that. So the real lesson here isn't about celebrities, it's about power structures. And any environment where money removes consequences, or status silences questions, or access replaces accountability, is an environment ripe for abuse. So the next time a scandal breaks and people rush to flatten every name into the same category, we need to pause and ask who benefited, who controlled the environment, who held the power, who had the most to lose if the truth came out, because it's rarely the people being invited. Understanding this doesn't protect predators, it protects future victims, because once you see how beguilement works, it stops being invisible, right? And you guys, I know that was a lot, but I say all of that to say this. I do believe that Chris Tucker had no idea what was going on. I do believe him when he said that he was just on, invited to a charity event, and unbeknownst to him, he did not know what was going on, because like I told you guys earlier, it's, predators operate in compartments. So they don't show their true selves to everyone, right? But at the end of the day, I do believe him, and I just believe that, at the time he was just guilty by association, which all of us are guilty of. We've had friends in high school who had bad reputation and whatnot, but somehow we get sucked into that lifestyle, or somehow we're judged because of who we're with, right? So what I want you guys to do is just comment on this video. Just let me know what you think, and I'll see you on the next video, okay?